Hello and welcome back to Val Verde Broadcasting. It's our show Archive Reviews, where we talk about an old thing that you've probably seen, or possibly not. This week it's the seminal British gangster movie Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels, directed by Guy Ritchie, produced by Matthew Vaughn and executive produced by Trudy Styler. It cost an amount of money and, was shot on a type of medium. I'm Richard Jackson, this is Duncan Casey. You probably know who we are because you're subscribed here. Nobody else watches this. It's deeply unpopular. Hi, Duncan.
Hi, Richard. No one knows who we are.
It's great. It's the
like
anonymity that lets us, do as we please. So we've embarked upon a kind of unofficial Guy Ritchie associated gangster season. We're going to do this, we're going to do Snatch, we're going to do Layer Cake, which is of course directed by Matthew Vaughn and not Guido Ritchie. Duncan, no further ado, can you tell me your experience? I've had a weird mood. We're both really stressed and have had a horrible week for unrelated reasons. Tell me about your experiences of Lock, Stock and how you first saw it.
Well, it came out at a time when I was, what would I have been, like 15, I think I was, and it was the thing I wasn't allowed to see. I guess it must have been an 18, but yeah, it was that thing that all the kids in the classroom were talking about and quoting. And the soundtrack was very Tarantino inspired. So it was like you got the soundtrack, I think, and it had quotes in it. Or was that Snatch? I can't remember. I'm sure they did that with Lock, Stock as well. But it felt to me like this was sort of ground zero for British gangster films. Of course, it's not. But it was talked about. So it got pressed, didn't it? Because they held a screening in LA and Tom Cruise attended. Famously, that's what they did. Trudy Styler invited him, and just because he turned up, it got a load of attention on the film, and then that's how it got picked up, I think. And it had been kicking around for a good few years before it got made. So it's one of those things where I think it was probably, I wouldn't call it lightning in a bottle quite, but it felt like a big cultural movement. I remember at the time, but it could have been my age. I don't know. What about you?
I'm going to probably piss you off here, I think. Well, firstly, yeah, it would have been. I'll tell you what'll piss you off, but yeah, it was a thing that went around on tape. It was like we'd all watched Pulp Fiction, so this is the one we had to watch now, the sweary grown up thing. And so I think I bought this on tape. So it was, I think someone showed it to her, because I think I've said this before. My brother and I used to go home for lunch from school, so we live around the corner. And what that would mean was we invite people round to ours every lunchtime and we would watch 45 minutes of a film. Because school was like 7 minutes walk. So you could watch 45 minutes of a film, have your lunch. So we'd watch things in chunks. So I saw Pulp Fiction like that, and I saw Reservoir Dogs like that, and I saw Dawn of the Dead like that. And Lock, Stock was one that we saw in chunks. What's going to piss you off is in year 11, so it would have been 16, I guess. So this was 2000 or 99. Miss Atkinson, our English teacher, said, has anybody got a film they want to bring in on Friday and we'll have a vote? And I brought in Lock, Stock, which is very obviously an 18. And Miss Atkinson, because it's double English, Miss Atkinson authorised like a renegade the viewing of Lock, Stock, and we watched Lock, Stock in English class, and because I think it was end of term or something, and had a grand old time. Miss Atkinson loved it, we all loved it. It was a really great way to see it because a lot of people hadn't seen it, weren't allowed to watch it at home, so it got a great reaction. Like everyone was laughing and stuff and having a grand time. So that's So I had the kind of opposite.
Why would that piss me off?
Oh, because you were like, I wasn't allowed to watch it, and I was like, because I was 15, I was like, we got to watch it in school. Like it was.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure I watched it. Yeah, no, I know I watched it. I guess once it came out on video, it was you were seeing it around your mates. Yeah. So I definitely saw it, but no, what I meant was, I couldn't have gone to the cinema, I don't think, to see it, and I wouldn't have been inclined to at 50. I don't think I wasn't really into that.
I saw Snatch we're going to do Snatch next, but Snatch was the first 18 I saw at the cinema.
So
it's got a very, very important place in my heart for that reason. But so this is based on a short film called The Hard Case, which was a Vaughn and Guy Ritchie joint, which I used to have taped off TV. I may still in my vast collection of things I taped off Channel 4. And it's kind of mostly about the poker game. And a hard case, which is a man, but it's a type of case. So Lock, Stock, I think has aged well. It's a film that I still it still has a place in my heart. Like I think what happened was, you talked about it being kind of ground zero British gangster films, and it was easy to feel that way when you were young and it was 1998. But it was certainly ground zero of a new wave of British gangster films, without question.
Yeah.
Like, to a degree that some people got quite annoyed with the glut of British gangster films that came afterwards. And there were so many irritators called... I can't remember, Adam and Joe had a fake one called Geezer Blokes with Guns or something. Or, no, Gun Blokes.
Yeah.
You know, so like it had the piss taken out of it and stuff. I mean,
I've done them. It's, you know,
man, it's a whole industry
very
now.
much.
I think there's a whole industry that owes a lot to Lock, Stock, and there wasn't a tremendous amount going on in British cinema at the time in terms of global reach. Like, it had its big train spotting moment, and then the year or two afterwards, I think the dust was settling, and then Lock, Stock came along. I get a bit... I don't want to piss on your chips in any way, but I get a bit annoyed with the Tarantino comparison, which I get because it's mostly based on the music and stuff, and it's got crime in it. But I think the similarities are kind of surface level, and it's something people bring up a lot, and it's like, well, I'm not really sure that's accurate in the broader strokes of it. I mean, it's a really interestingly made film. It's a brilliantly entertaining, brilliantly visual, kind of quite wittily written and everything. Like, because it's got the kind of super time ramp sequence at the beginning, and not forgetting this is all shot on film. Use some kind of experimental sciencey camera that they had to get in from somewhere. So, when Statham tips all the stuff out, so that and you can see it, they're shooting it and it's flickering because they're shooting at some insane frame rate. And there's loads of really interesting lens choices, amazing sound design, like the cards like slapping on the desk, and so when he's leaving the card game, like the camera tracks to his face, and the kind of musical fades up, but you got the ambient sound kind of goes down, and there's this sense that he's kind of punch drunk from having lost all of their money. Is it £250,000? I think it's
something like that, yeah.
And then they realise they can rob the guns and cover it and everything. I think it's got a hell of a lot going for it. I mean, I think the idea that it's just this kind of scrappy independent is true, but also it's got Trudy Styler's husband Sting lent himself to a cameo in it, and Vinnie Jones, who used to be a footballer for Wimbledon, is in it. Dexter Fletcher had done a lot. I mean, so it's kind of and it's got loads of people from sitcoms. There's lots of comedy actors in it, which really, really works for it. Like the two Scouse blokes and stuff, and I just think there's a hell of a lot going on in it. I think perhaps the Tarantino thing comes from the kind of interlocking, interwovery plot thing. I don't know.
I mean, it's more of just a sort of, I think, a kind of tonal thing. I mean, and like you say, I mean, it's a surface read. I'm not suggesting there's too much credence to that, but I guess it came at a similar time. It was in that same sort of, it was gangsters and and again, like I said, and blokes, gangstery blokey blokes, and it was kind of, and like we talked about, I think ages ago when we did Get Shorty. I mean, Get Shorty came before all the Tarantino stuff, and that has a very Tarantino. So it was obviously in the zeitgeist, it's that kind of that quick talking gangster thing. It was just kind of, I guess, transposed onto British culture in a way, and I think especially in the States that played quite well. I remember there being a bit, because there's a bit where they're all speaking Cockney rhymey slang and they subtitle it or something.
Yeah, they subtitled
Is that right?
it. Yeah, I believe that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
You dumb foreigners. It's very kind of. I don't. I'm still kind of reeling from the fact that someone somewhere went, you know what, this guy needs to do Aladdin.
Or Sherlock Holmes, really.
Yeah, or did Sherlock Holmes. It's something we've talked about before. And I can see the Sherlock Holmes one. It's quite an Americanized Sherlock Holmes, isn't it? Despite the fact it's British direction in Britain and stuff. But like him being hit up as a Disney director. But then I suppose the thing is, and what people like to forget is, he probably brings things in on time and under budget and is easy to work with. Those are all good things. People like to talk about those like they're bad things. Those are good things to do when you work in film. Being
6 degrees from seven bacons.
6 degrees from seven bacon. We should have called our show that.
This was I know people who've worked with Guy Ritchie, and by all accounts, he's a lovely bloke. Quite what the fudge he was doing with Madonna, I don't know, but there you go. He apparently he's a lovely guy and really fun to work with and everything, and so I think that shines through, because I mean, like, he's had some flops,
Oh boy, has he ever!
He's always getting a second bite of the cherry. So I think he is quite a nice guy. But yeah.
Yeah, because it's like the King Arthur movie and stuff like that. I mean, I don't really know that he ever really quite hit the highs of this and say Snatch. I think
Snatch.
In my opinions,
Snatch was probably the apex. I think because was it Rock and Roller after that? Was it? Or...
Yeah, I've never seen Rock and Roller. I'm going to be watching The Gentleman with someone at the weekend.
Oh God!
I recently watched.
I'm sorry.
Was fucking what was the one? Wrath of Man.
Oh yeah, that was the
yeah.
That's right. I didn't see that.
Oh.
Feel my wrath.
Feel my wrath of mine. Oh, it's a megalodon. That felt like you know when people say a film is like a story being told to you by a 4-year-old. Wrath of Man felt like a story being told to me by a brick. I don't
Amazing.
Really know. It was just so dumb, but it's like, yeah, but it's clever because it's got chess and I've done a revenge, and it was fucking dreadful. I really did not like it. I haven't seen his Aladdin film.
No, I haven't. My wife saw it. Said it was really good. It was just like the cartoon. I was like, why don't you watch the cartoon then? I can't imagine.
Wife, you dumb bitch. Why don't you watch the cartoon then?
I can't imagine that. That Will Smith is any kind of replacement for Robin Williams. And when I look at the bits I've seen of it, I've had the misfortune of seeing online. It's kind of like he's just doing that, but as Will Smith, which doesn't work. I mean,
fair enough.
Fair enough. But whatever.
I mean, in terms of like Lock, Stock itself, like there are so many. What I think, I'm probably just undoing my own non-argument, but I think. Where the kind of Tarantino stuff perhaps comes from is because it's lots of kind of interlocking stories that come together at once. Because it's a big wacky caper, right? It's a big wacky caper that goes wrong. So you've got all these distinct scenes and this very varied cast and everything. And you've got the guys who grow weed, and then you've got the Scouse robbers, and then you've got the kind of sex baron and his enforcer, and then you've got the guys that run a pub, and then you've got the da-da-da-da. And so in a lot of ways they're kind of like sketches, little skit, because there's a bit about Hatchet Harry beating someone to death with a dildo, and there's anything with the Scouse guys in, and the guy gets his afro blown in half, with the kind of the centre parting, and it's like smoking and stuff. You got Rory Breaker, who's a great villain turning Rory Breaker, because he's a guy who used to be on the Lenny Henry sketch show years ago. And there's that bit where, because great bit with Danny John Jules is the landlord of that pub. Is he the landlord of the pub? Or I can't remember. Danny John Jules in there, and he talk about how he orders Drambuie and spits it on that geezer and sets him on fire. You remember? It's a little amazing little flashback scene.
Yeah, but it's been a while since I've seen it.
Oh, it has. Okay, it's very burning because I watched it. It's one of these things like. It was a transgressive thing to watch, so we all watched it a bunch, and I made myself sick of it. It's too much of a good thing.
I've worked with so many people from it.
Well, you worked with Jason Fleming.
I worked with. I didn't work with Jason Fleming. I knew Jason Fleming through an ex-girlfriend, and I used to chat to him quite a lot, and he told me a lot of stories about it. But lovely guy. Nick Moran, I've worked with a couple of times. And we've been in just like a bunch of the same movies, but like never really like worked together. But we've just been in so many movies. We've seen each other at like screenings and premieres and shit a lot. Stephen Marcus, I worked with. Who's Nick the Greek.
Oh God, Stephen Marcus. Yeah, he's done. This is what I mean. Because he's done shitloads of comedy. Like there's, I think it's really, it's about as kosher as a sausage synagogue.
Alan Ford, of course.
Yeah, Alan Ford, quite a small. It's quite a small role for Alan Ford.
He's the narrator, isn't he?
And he works in the pub with Sting, so he's in it briefly.
Yeah,
faces in it. Frank Harper as well as Dog. He gets about.
Fucking forget Rob Brydon's in it.
Rob Brydon's the traffic warden. Yes,
that's right.
Yes, cocoon him in gaffer tape. That's a great little turn by him. That's a great little turn by Rob Brydon. Yeah, of course. I think that's the first thing I recognised Rob Brydon in, actually.
Yeah.
So what's
apparently Nick the Greek was supposed to be played by Stephen Marcus was supposed to play Tom, who Jason Fleming plays.
Ah.
That was how it was originally cast, and I think Jason told me this, and he said that's why there's like there's jokes about him being fat all the time that no one acknowledges.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. They call him, I always found that really weird.
Yeah, when apparently it's just because it was supposed to be Stephen Marcus originally.
I always thought that was a kind of Little John thing.
It kind of works. It works as a sort of like, it's obviously an in joke we're just not in on, but yeah, that's yeah.
Would you know what I associate this film with? This film is piss yellow throughout, isn't it?
It is.
It's an aggressively yellow film.
Yeah, negative. Yeah, it was. I mean, by all accounts, it's something they were trying to develop for a while. I think I think Jason said they did a table read 2 years or something before they ever shot anything, and that it was just something he did as a job. And then he said a bunch of people from the table read just got cast in it. But I think Vinnie Jones was their kind of stunt casting. Really, there wasn't any. I mean, everyone else, was sort of known from a bit of UK TV here and there, but there wasn't anyone particularly massive at the time. Everyone from it has gone on to do big things.
Yeah, you can trace a lot of careers back to this. I think Frank Harper as Dog, like he's basically the main villain. I remember everybody used to think it was Ray Winston. It's like, no, it's just a similarly shaped man. They're not the same person at all. I remember people still say Ray Winston's in Lock, Stock. It's like no.
Have you seen Lock, Stock?
Have you watched it? Yeah, and he's not, because he's in Football Factory and stuff as well. He's not the strongest performer in this movie, but there's a lot of big guns in this movie as well. That's the other thing. Like, that's important to remember. Like, and again, there's kind of varying levels of British celebrity in it. Like, it's one of these things where you kind of watch it and it's people who've got famous since. I think the Vinnie Jones thing was the thing where the press loved that, because it's like, he can't act, football as shit. Vinnie Jones is pretty fucking good in this, and like he only gets better, I think. Like, if you need to know where to put Vinnie Jones. Don't get me wrong, but because he's had a really fucking interesting career as an actor. Regardless of what you think of the man, like he can act, and it's obviously little Chris, isn't it? He's got like a little mini me in there. Yeah,
of course. Yeah. I forgot about that. Yeah, because he smashes the guy's head in the door, doesn't he? That's really great.
Take your son to work day, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Vinny's fine. Again, I haven't met him or worked with him, but I know lots of people who have. And I've heard varying things. I mean, most people say he's really lovely, but I had one bad story about him from someone. But I think it was right after his wife had just died, I think.
Yeah, his wife died.
I heard that about Liam Neeson as well. When Miranda Richardson died, that was like he snapped at someone on set. But it was like, you
can't be too mad about that, really.
I would.
Yeah. So I can't give him. You got to give him kind of the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. So his wife's died, lads. Like, probably. I think the thing with Vinnie Jones is because he was, on the hook for being an actual violent nutcase.
He'd just been released from prison, I think, before he started filming.
Yeah, and I think he kind of had a rep as a footballer as being a violent nutcase. So that kind of didn't help. Because I think he played for Wimbledon. And do you think this has kind of, I don't know. The strange thing about this is like, as soon as the follow-up comes, it's got loads of Americans in it, and it's just like, okay, I can see what you wanted. You wanted to go work in Hollywood, which he did, highly successful.
Well, it's sold there. That's the thing. I think that's the success of Lock, Stock is actually more down to America than to here. I think they were struggling to get it sold here. And like I say, they set up this screening where Tom Cruise was invited, and that literally just got all the press. And then I think he came out and said, "Oh, it's great," or whatever. And they went, "Okay, brilliant," and so it just got this ton of attention.
I'm it's great.
It's really great. I don't know. Fuck, I can't do Tom Cruise. But that's what got it sold there. And then I think because of that, it did huge business in the States. It was a real breath of fresh air, change of, and I can see why, because the sort of general fodder of late 90s Hollywood would have been your Boggo sort of political thrillers, your Jack Ryans, your fucking all that
around
business.
there, wasn't there? There's a lot of
There's a lot of good stuff, but there was a lot of there was a lot of kind of it was a lot of Meg Ryan and fucking what's her name, Anne Hesh and God rest her soul. God,
yeah.
and what's the other one? Ashley Judd. It was all that lot. There was a lot of female stars, which was cool. But it was like, it was really kind of, what's the Courage Under Fire and all that. And there was some good stuff. But I know what you mean. It was been a bit of like I can see this being quite a palate cleanser for your average American moviegoer. And then, like you say, Snatch is just full of Americans who think it's really funny to do British accents or Irish accents and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's got like because I really like Snatch, and we're going to get there in a minute. But like for a separate video, we're not mad. We're not make content.
Not made of content.
We're not made of content. It's very much capitalising on that sudden fame, and it feels a bit kind of pandering. But then it's like this film had a lot of truck in the US, so you probably would do that.
Yeah, I can see why. Yeah,
and
it's a sequel basically. It's just but
it's one of these things because you've got returning actor as a different character, but they could be in the LST. Wait, hold on, the LSTSBCU, which is the Lock, Stock, Two Smoking Barrels shared cinematic universe. In case you were wondering,
right?
But they're so tonally similar. It's just like
I think it was sort of good entertainment. I know Guy Ritchie would probably wax lyrical about the subtext and the underpinnings of Lock, Stock. I don't think they're there. Personally, I don't think that's really what the takeaway is for most audiences, and that's okay.
Yeah, because not every film is important to say. Not every film has to have that. Despite how we talk sometimes, not every film has to have that at all, right? Like it's not vital, it's not essential at all. Which is good because this film doesn't have it. I'm not saying there are no themes in it, but it's a very stylish, very engagingly written, very well edited, very well paced caper. And that's kind of what I think. Because I'm not aware, and this is a good place to draw a line between Tarantino and Guy Ritchie. I'm not aware of Guy Ritchie particularly referencing other films. Like he referenced Aladdin because he made it, but there's no kind of and again it's not something every film needs or anything. I think people get a bit up their asses about that, but never at any point do I kind of go, oh yeah, this is a reference even to like an Ealing comedy or whatever. I think there's some things in the text, but in terms of the way things are shot and stuff like that, I don't. And I really think I will say that about Lock, Stock as well. They does that kind of washed out yellow thing, which is presumably maybe it's just telecined and digital. It could be some kind of chemical process, but that's a deliberate choice, right? And the piss yellow branding of Lock, Stock really works. And on all of the promotional materials, remember the poster? The US had a poster that was not as good. Like the British one had that kind of, remember the yellow and the black and the kind of photocopied look, and it kind of feels like an extension of the look of the film, and it is shot on film, so it has that grimy graininess to it all the way through. And quite often I go when I'm in London, particularly East London, I'm kind of like, oh, that looks like one of the buildings from Lock, Stock, but then I kind of go yeah, but they've demolished all of London twice since this was made. So who's to say?
Yeah, it does sort of fit in with Trainspotting and that kind of underbelly, look at the UK. I mean that existed before then, but I suppose it's how it was shot. I suppose it was a newer generation of filmmakers as well. I think that's part of it. I think it was the old guard had sort of departed the building, and I think you were looking at more, because you go back to things like Long Good Friday and all those, Bob Hoskinsy, Michael Caine gangster films, and they were very much part of that old rank, going way back.
Yeah, those latter day colour ones are the tail end of the kind of first wave 60s British gangster narrative stuff.
With
a lot of the same people, a lot of the same personnel.
And it certainly didn't. They didn't have the sort of they weren't as flashily shot So but I think it was the ushering in of a certain era of British filmmaking that kind of hasn't really gone away. It's sort of it's the post Vindaloo fart that won't leave the room. It's still kind of there. And I say,
odor.
and I say this as someone who participates in that. And they're fine. I think people enjoy them, but that it feels like something that people try to revive. And it's like the craze. Go to Hollywood or whatever. It's just kind of do we have to?
The craze go Hawaiian.
yeah. And it's all full of those people trying to make quotes and they'll usually cast someone like Alan or someone in it just to try and get some credence. And again, that's fine. Like I say, I've made those films, so it's like, well, I can't. I don't have a leg to stand on really, but it is still prevalent here, and I do think there's a fatigue with it, but I also think there's people go, but it sells, and it's like, does it though?
Well, so for example, I think they're on I've never seen a Rise of the Foot Soldier movie, but
right,
I think there's 5 of them, and the first one or the first couple, or at least the first one, based on a book, and then they go off and do their own thing. And Rise of the Foot Soldier movies make money. Right, and I don't think they get theatrical release, but that's what you'll see.
My mate makes them. I know who makes them.
Well, there you go. Yeah. You'll see them on DVD everywhere, and you see them on all streaming because people watch them. Mm-hmm. And those they made sequels to Green Street.
Yeah, my friend made those as well.
Oh, there you go. So people eat those up, right? And they sell everywhere. You see them. It's one of the ones you will see in all the places where DVDs are sold. And I think a lot of that resurgence comes from this. I think it's really owed.
Definitely,
it's really.
I think, and then more broadly, you've got like Scott Adkins films. It sounds like a name drop. I don't mean to, but I just mean like that kind of British martial arts thing is its own sort of subgenre, and that Statham is kind of a part of. Even though I know he's in much more mainstream stuff, but it's like there is a sort of subgenre of British martial arts that doesn't get that much acknowledgement.
And you go back to Gary Daniels with that as well. Before that. Scott Adkins is really flying the flag for that shit though. He's like the kind of ambassador for it at the moment. But I remember because obviously this came out and then Snatch came out and then I can't remember what that dreadful one where Statham has a mullet in. It's really, really bad.
It's not
Revolver.
It's
an appallingly dreadful movie. But Statham is particularly when he's Turkish in Snatch, right? 'Cause main character, and then he turned up in a Luc Besson martial arts film. It was like the fucking guy from Snatch, and then doing all this insane martial arts shit, right? And just being ripped. And then I always remember there's the bit with the Easy Rollers track in Lock Stock when they have their getting stoned montage, and Statham does a handstand or a backflip in it. It's like 2 seconds, and you never think about it, and it's like, oh yeah, because he was a fucking athlete and martial artist this whole time. But none of that is used. I think it's great, when he stacks it on the stairs and spills all the stuff in slow motion, like we talked about. There's a hint of that physicality because he's kind of jumping in midair. But it's not like he's going around. None of them, because what's great about the leads in this is that they're kind of rubbish. They kind of want to be thugs, and the best they can do is beat up a half-conscious traffic warden. They don't actually get involved in the proper violence. They're all kind of mildly pathetic. So I don't know. It's that part of it's odd. They're a really fun quad of people. It's a really fun little group of characters, and they all kind of insult each other and stuff. And I still like to use the line when someone gives me a very elaborate drink. I like to say I could fall in love with an orangutan in that. Because I asked for a refreshing drink. I could fall in love with an orangutan in that.
Yeah, it was full of those. That's why I remember the soundtrack, because everyone had the soundtrack, and it was one of those same thing with Pulp Fiction. I'd heard the soundtrack a million times before I saw the film, and it is just all that let me feel the fibre of your fabric and all that shit.
Shaun of the Dead did that as well, because it's these are all tracks that already exist, so we have to spice it up somehow. So here's
of course,
spliced in and everything.
Yeah. But yeah, it was. I mean, I think we were in the wheelhouse for it, definitely at that age. Wanting to be naughty little grotty boys and watch, men swear and be naughty. it was, primed for it. So yeah. I must watch it again actually because I do think it is.
Yeah, it's a
got
load
lot
of fun. I think this is the thing. It's kind of because I'm not terribly bothered by kind of crime and gangster films usually, but this is in a lot of ways a kind of live action cartoon. By design, right? I think it is by design a sort of live action cartoon, and it's a fun caper, and it's sort of like it's more like a kind of really sweary Ealing comedy than anything else.
Yeah, true.
It's got more in common with like Passport to Pimlico than it has with like Serpico. Oh, look at that!
Kind arts and coracans.
Kind cunts and cunter cunts. Apparently, if you do that at the end of the video, it doesn't affect your monetization. Good luck.
That's it. I left it. Well, yeah. So it's the first minute that's the problem.
Get them all out. Get all the cunts out at the end. That's what we're doing. Getting all the cunts out. So I think, I have some thoughts on Guy Ritchie's style that I'm going to leave for the Snatch video because this is now a duo of Guy Ritchie things. I get the feeling that you would rather be talking about Snatch.
I think I've seen it more. So
okay.
yeah, probably.
I think you're going to have more to say about Snatch, aren't you?
Yeah, maybe.
I see. Well, anyway, I think probably. Shall we wrap this up?
Yes.
For our purposes, we're going to talk immediately about Snatch, but you're not going to see it till sometime after, dear viewer. So we don't know when that will be, but it'll be in the future. Then we're going to talk about Layer Cake, which I think is shit. But
spoilers.
Sorry, smelling my own farts there, but I do. It's a very disappointing film. So Duncan doesn't share my opinions. It's fine. That's just what I don't listen to me. You got anything else to say before we head off into the wild blue yonder?
No, only. I mean, you're wrong, but let's leave it at that.
Save it for 2 episodes hence. Then
yes,
I can tell you why you're wrong. Okay, I'm going to go to credits. Credits, and we'll see you all again soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye. Ugh.